It's incredible. It really is. What is happening in the area of architecture and architecture evolution? It's happening faster than ever, especially in healthcare, where design intersects with technology, patient experience, and operational efficiency, pun intended and pun not intended, simultaneously. In this episode, principals of Parkin Architects, Rebecca McDonald and Kyle Basilius of Parkin Architects, discuss the changing landscape of hospital design, from universal versus private healthcare systems to the integration of AI and robotics. It's amazing. Discover how architecture shapes outcomes for patients, families, and staff while anticipating the healthcare changes of tomorrow. I think this is an apropos time to be having this conversation as most Americans look to 2026 as they're looking at what their healthcare costs are going to be. And while this isn't necessarily going to help the healthcare costs, it certainly does help and address the efficiencies. So join us for a deep dive into the world of healthcare architecture with Parkin Architects Rebecca McDonald and Kyle Basilius, who share their insights from decades of experience designing hospitals across Canada, the US, and Europe. From flexible master planning and lifespan considerations to advancing lighting, patient control systems, and automated logistics. They reveal how design can directly impact health, wellness, and operational efficiency. You know this. If you're a designer, you know this because you work it into your residential, commercial, and hospitality projects. But when you think about healthcare architecture, it really galvanizes the point. And we explore how emerging technologies like AI, remote diagnostics, and robotics are beginning to influence design decisions and operational planning, creating safer, more adaptive, and human-focused healthcare environments. Whether you're interested in the philosophy of design, future-proofing healthcare, infrastructure, or the intersection of technology and empathy, this conversation highlights the practical and visionary approaches taking shape in hospitals today, and you're going to hear all about it right after this. At the highest level of design, the absolute best specifying designers, architects, landscape designers are all highly focused on the technology and performance of products and materials today. You have to, because the products you specify for your projects have to perform and they have to last. That's one of the reasons why I am so proud to be working with TimberTech. Their focus on the technical renaissance of synthetic decking is literally changing the conversation about innovation and performance. It pulls focus on three priorities homeowners have and expect from the products their designers and architects specify for their luxury projects. 1. Aesthetics must match the overall design and fit visually. 2. Durability and maintenance. I've told you about my board flipping stories from my own wood decks. Clients not only want beauty, but they want ease of use, and they want it to last for decades. 3, sustainably made. Clients are more conscious of the environment now, and they want the same of their materials. TimberTech hits each one of these elements with a product that not only meets expectations, they exceed them. TimberTech makes a synthetic decking that looks just like wood, color and embossed wood grain for a natural appearance. Their composite decking is technologically superior, as it has been created to last for decades, and it's manufactured with up to 85% recycled material. Their advanced PVC, vintage, and landmark collections have a Class A flame spread rating, making these products an amazing choice for wildfire-prone areas, which unfortunately continues to grow on the risk map. Check the show notes for more information about this and to find the nearest showroom or lumberyard where you can find TimberTech, or you can check them out directly, timbertech.com. So to set the table, a couple of years ago, I took a course through MIT on machine learning and artificial intelligence, just because I was curious and I wanted to know more about it. And while the math literally destroyed me, what I was able to glean from the lectures and the course material about what artificial intelligence is now versus what it was 2 years ago versus what it's going to be in 5 years, seeing how that's just one aspect to how architecture is changing. The nature of healthcare is changing. The nature of technology in the shelter space as well as the commercial space is changing. And with that, you have to have architects who change with it. And so what I kind of wanted to do is launch this with, if you could each introduce yourselves, and Rebecca, we'll start with you, and just sort of go into how you wound up where you are and what you do. I think it'll make sense to anyone listening why we're having this conversation.
Okay. So I'm Rebecca McDonald. I'm a principal at Parkin Architects and work primarily out of our Toronto, Ontario office. And I primarily focus on healthcare planning. I've been with Parkin for about 12 years. Have predominantly, almost solely worked in the healthcare sector. And I got here because I have a sibling who spent a lot of time in healthcare facilities as a child, and just always thought that we could design better spaces that were more supportive for families and staff and patients. And that's kind of been my mission since I started to work with Parkin.
That's great. Kyle?
Yeah, and I'm Kyle Basilius. I'm a principal at Parkin. I'm based in Vancouver office, so I work on most of the British Columbia hospitals. I'm American. I am working towards my dual citizenship in Canada, but I have worked in the United States, and I've did a stint before Canada in Denmark for 4 years. So I've designed hospitals in the United States, Denmark, and then now Canada. So have a little bit of a worldview of how different healthcare systems deliver healthcare, and then how does the healthcare architecture market kind of respond to that? Um, like Rebecca, I would say my bread and butter, what I enjoy the most is planning healthcare rooms and departments and working with clinicians to solve problems, to find the right solutions for them. But recently I've moved more into management where I'm now overseeing my current cancer hospital I'm designing. I'm kind of the design lead and principal in charge. So I have teams running the clinical and running the design, but I'm kind of the person overseeing all of that. Um, and how I got into healthcare. It's funny. I all my both my grandparents were nurses, grandmothers, but I kind of fell into it. I wanted to move back home to Ohio. I moved to Florida after I graduated undergrad in Miami University, and I ended up working at a pediatrics firm that specialized in pediatric hospitals. And at first I was like, "Ooh, I don't want to design hospitals," but then my friend who worked there was like, "Oh, no, you got to see what we're doing." And like the first hospital was Dublin Methodist in Columbus that had like trees in the lobby, and 80% of the rooms had natural light and had all these evidence-based design principles that were being driven by the Center for Health Design. And I was like, oh, it's not a white sterile, maze that nobody ever wants to go to. It just opened my eyes to like how design and thoughtfulness and empathy can really drive a different outcome, at least through buildings, and then therefore affect the lives of the people who actually visit these buildings. So it was kind of happenstance, but then I fell in love with it, and I'm about 21 years in now. So
Is that all?
23 more to go. I'm not counting to retirement, but
Who's counting?
everyone around me is retiring. I'm like, I've got 23 more years.
Do you know what's really interesting though is I imagine when you got to architecture school, designing hospitals was not sexy. It wasn't. It was not like, oh, this is
Never even
cool.
thought of it.
Yeah, I'm going to get on the, I'm going to be an Arc Digest. I'm
Mhm.
going to be a healthcare starchitect. Those didn't exist, but I think it's changing. And the reason why, and to your point, you both mentioned this, is that the experience is changing and there's a greater focus on those who the space is to serve. And it's not just the patients, but it's staff, it's doctors, it's surgeons, it's nurses, it's families. It's really everyone who takes part of it. And I kind of want to launch this with one question, which seems very simple, but I know it's not. And because Parkin, you have a lot of projects in Canada, I'm curious, what is the difference in the way you think about the architecture of a healthcare space between a system that is single payer or universal versus what we have in the US, which, look, just honestly, does it work? It's functional. Like if something's wrong, you can go get it fixed. But our healthcare system is broken. Um, and you can see it in a lot of ways. But I'm curious, you sort of maybe a compare and contrast. How do you feel like a universal system is different than a two pair?
Kyle, I'm going to let you take that one to start, and I'll
Do you want to
follow.
talk, is your question more around healthcare delivery and how the system works for access versus how it affects design and architecture, or is it both?
Well, it's both. It's a good question,
Mhm.
and I didn't make it clear, probably because I don't have the answer to this one,
Right.
it's more of, I think it's probably more of a philosophical question, to be honest with you.
Hmm.
But where it comes from is a friend of mine, and I've talked about this on the podcast just a ton. I've told this story, so I'll make it brief. I asked a friend of mine about going his education in architecture. And it was like, what did you learn? I never went to school for architecture. And I asked him, what is it that you learned away from it? Did you learn to design? He was like, no, I didn't learn to design. I learned to think critically.
Hmm.
And
Problem solve. That's what we do.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. And I think that's really interesting. And I think that because of the two systems that we're looking at are so vastly different, they don't serve the end user in the same way, which goes back to if you've got $1 billion project, I'm not asking for budgets and where that money goes to. I'm kind of asking what's the philosophy behind it? You as creatives, you as designers, planners, programmers, how do you think about how the spaces that you're designing are being designed to work?
Well, I'll start at the beginning, just try to be brief. I've in the US, the kind of consumer-driven market to design and deliver healthcare is competition-based, right? The two-payer
Yeah.
system. Access is plentiful, but it's expensive, right? Um, and then when I worked in Denmark and Canada, it's similar. It's publicly financed, so it's driven where most is free, not all, but then access gets very much diminished. So it's hard to access the system when it's free, and there's no competition. So like I still don't have a general practitioner. I've been here for 6 years. So like, because there's just not enough general practitioners. So uh, that's one thing, and just how healthcare delivery is different. So I don't think there's probably a happy medium, but I'm not saying one system is doing it better because often you'll hear that, oh, Canada has it better because it's publicly financed healthcare, but that comes with its own caveats and issues as like many things. Um, how do we design healthcare? I mean, hospitals design, there is like a standard of like staff wellness, patient wellness across the board and all the different types of systems that are delivering healthcare. I will say when we get a $2 billion project, it's financed by the Ministry of Health, it's financed by the government, it's financed by the taxpayer dollars. There is an obligation, same with in Europe, obligation that it's for the community, it's for the public. Um, we need to be good stewards of that money. So there's more scrutiny around it. And so that whole piece is more in the open air than it would be in, say, the United States. Um, but the objective is still the same. We need to create spaces and a home for staff wellness, for staff to want to come to work, to recruit staff, keep staff healthy and their mental health sane so they can take care of the patients. That's a big part of the patient care. Then the family and visitors, do we have enough family space built into the patient rooms? Do we have enough spaces for them to go decompress away from the room and also meet other families that are in the same situation and become friends and share stories. They're also part of the caregiving piece and getting patients in and out of the room. Um, and then there's this idea of, a lot of this evidence-based design principles around, you know, access to light, access to nature, outdoor space, fresh air, that increases the ability to heal. And that helps throughput and operational. Because the operational throughput and design and the planning of how a hospital runs is very integral to how we design a hospital. Because if we don't get those lined up, the architecture will fail or the design will fail. And then you'll have constant renovations like you see all the time, which is pretty typical because things are always changing with the technology and what's important to that facility.
Yeah, Rebecca, thoughts?
Yeah, I just wanted to add on to that from a Canadian perspective is really considering these investments. Really, the hospital life expectancy of a healthcare of a hospital is about 50 years, right? And so how can in that time frame care delivery can change drastically, as you can imagine, in the last 50 years, how much just technology alone has changed the delivery of care. And so as we design spaces, it's really about, what does future proofing actually mean? How do we bake in flexibility to accommodate changing practices and 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 changing uses and changing equipment on a very regular basis, right? And so I think that is also part of what we consider kind of the really utilitarian things like this thing. We need to be able to evolve this building over time. And so it's current use, and then what does the use look like in the future, and how do we plan for that?
One of the things I was going to ask you was about the lifespan of a structure as you envision it, and you mentioned 50 years. I'm curious, when that 50 years, is that the lifespan of the structure in relation to the technology and the programming that it was designed to serve? Or does that mean that that's the physical enclosure that, it's going to break down materiality, it's going to break down, over 50 years. And the idea is, you look at a hotel in Las Vegas, and I think the lifespan is like 10 or 15 years for most of them. And that's not because of the structure, it's because of the programming. So I'm curious, when you think about it that way, is it because of the structure itself versus technology in materiality and where materials are going now, means and methods? Or is it what happens within the closure as far as it can be repurposed from within?
I'll start. In my opinion, it's really about the means and methods. The structure itself, the building structure itself, probably lasts about 50 years. Now, that's relative to, I would say, my like our current position, right? There's how we build hospitals now versus 50 years ago is very different in terms of planning uh for disaster planning, like floor to floor heights and etc. And fire safety. We plan differently now than we did 50 years ago. So maybe that means that the structures we're building now are going to last and extend, beyond that 50-year life cycle. But to this point, what um, the thing about healthcare facilities is that the people who operate them are super adaptable, and um, we wedge in when we do renovations on older projects. We, we can do a lot with a 25-year-old building, right? And re-envision how we can use the space within. And so I think that we try to design so that we can change the programming and adapt the programming within the existing kind of core and shell of the building. And that's kind of really important from a healthcare perspective. As delivery models, as the patient profile changes, despite our best intentions, we need to support a future renovation, and like planning for that is really key, right? Where are our key infrastructure moments within the floor plate, right? And does it allow us to kind of flex, in 10 to 15 years time? So it also depends on like the area of the building, right? The patient units and where the inpatient rooms are relatively kind of fixed, perhaps less flexible than what we would call the podium spaces, right? Where you've got your medical imaging, operating rooms and ambulatory, outpatient care. Kyle, do you have anything else?
Yeah, and you have to think of hospitals kind of like little cities. So like we do master plans, and like I'm currently working on this new hospital in Vancouver. Um, they decided, it wasn't affordable to find a new greenfield site and actually build new, just because the amount of beds they'd have to take from multiple occupancy to single occupancy. So they're in a phased renewal master plan strategy. So, but they're built phase one, which is around a very old existing building that's at 50 years. And we'll have to do renovations in that, and it has to come with mechanical upgrades, structural upgrades. Then they'll take down, as that one gets built, they'll decant an old building, move into the new building, and then take that one out. And then we'll build the last phase of this current renewal, and that will end up being all the beds moving in there. And then we still have an old kind of a building from the 70s that still has multiple occupancy bedrooms, but we can't afford to take it down yet until we build a phase three. So it's kind of a very long strategy of master planning and phasing things out because um, to the original point of 50-year lifespan, there becomes a point of the business case of, do I keep it and upgrade it? Because, probably by then, like Rebecca said, everything's out of date and it really can't support the growth and the changes that facility needs or sees from population growth or technology. And then you have to make the business case. Do we build new or we phase it and then we casually phase out the old buildings?
So the traditional campus model. What's interesting though, and I want your take on this because I think it's fascinating. If you think about residential construction, hasn't really changed much. Yeah, I mean there's some new things here and there, but stick built, it's primarily residential architecture is still primarily built the same way. If you look at um, residential housing on a university campus or how those campuses are built, it's relatively the same. It hasn't really changed much. If you look at how prisons are being built, it hasn't really changed much. But healthcare facilities, the potential for what you can work with. And I'll give you one example of something that came up last week at CIX while I was there talking to some integrators and some tech brand representatives. This idea that it's not now, but we're not so far away from a future where you could have a rural healthcare outbuilding that's built to serve a community that it could be manned or womaned by a nurse or another healthcare professional, but you can conduct surgeries between AI, telecommunications, robotics. You can conduct surgery there where maybe the surgeon is 150, 1,000 miles away, provided certain conditions exist. Do you think about that? I mean, not for now, but because it's never a binary process. It's never like now it's this and tomorrow it's going to be this, right? There's a
Mhm.
process. How do you think about that?
Is it-
Well, I could start just
go.
briefly. Um, how do I think about that? We're always being tasked to do more with less and do things faster and innovate more. And when we say innovate, new ways of doing things, healthcare is the most expensive typology of building to build. They're just expensive per square meter, per square foot. Um, the advancements of AI on healthcare are much more advancing and will have their biggest benefit on the operational side, like you mentioned. Um, we don't know yet what that will mean for architecture or built spaces that'll be needed or flexed. Um, but we're seeing rapid advancement of using AI technology in the way clinical care is being delivered, which takes strain off of needing more staff or the fact that we can't find clinicians, right? Or people are getting out of the industry, and how do we get more staff to actually deliver the care as the current baby boomers are aging? Um, But yeah, we think about it, but a lot of times in infrastructure, it's out of our control, but it's definitely on the forefront of discussion.
I think things you have to start and think about, like very kind of at the very rudimentary level, is like what kind of infrastructure and backbone do you need to support that kind of remote surgery, both at the acute center where the surgeon is and at that remote community location. Like what does that actually look like? Internet on the very basic level, right? You need to have the internet infrastructure to support that, and then the capacity to kind of convince patients that that's the other kind of leaps and bounds, not so much architecture related, but really convince patients that this is the way to go. Um, I think on a smaller level, perhaps not jumping all the way to surgery, remote surgery, but going to looking at how you deliver outpatient care in new ways. And so I think we have examples of that now. So there was this big push up until now to, I would say in the last couple of years, to go back in Ontario anyway, go back to a mega hospital, right? Consolidate all of the programming on one site, consolidate all of your resources and your staffing and your beds so you have scale, right? The challenges with that is that you've got it's depending on where you are in the province, the physical infrastructure to get to those hospitals is difficult, right? It's difficult for people to make it to the acute care center. And so what we're seeing, and it's kind of starting in Eastern Canada and moving west, I would say, is to go to this kind of hub and spoke model. So you've got your acute center, and it's at the center of the city, and then you've got your more community-based care that's outside of the city, easier for people to get to, access to parking across the street from Costco and Best Buy, right? It supports like this wellness component. If it's easier to get to your primary care provider and easier to get an X-ray and a CT scan and an MRI and your blood work done, more people are apt to do that, right? And what we've seen in the US, also coupled with that, not so much here yet, but we've seen is that those primary care providers then start to prescribe like wearable technology. And what that looks like is that those community care centers are your check-in points for that wearable tech, right? So you've got this remote monitoring of patients, and you've got this broader understanding and observation of their health, not just from a moment in time, from a 5-minute visit with your physician, but from a extended period of observation and collecting data. And so what does that supports care in a different way. So I mean, logistically, we have to host all of that data somewhere, and someone has to process that data and decide what that does. And perhaps AI will help with that, right? Help with the processing and analyzing of data and supporting diagnoses. From another aspect, just the interface of patients and that tech and supporting that interface, making people comfortable with that. You're seeing like the Apple help desks for we're designing desks for people to check in, and this is how I'm going to use my tech at home, and and I can call this individual from home if I'm having issues, right? So it's impacting it in smaller ways. I think perhaps first we'll see it at a more outpatient clinic kind of level before the remote surgery. And that will help people kind of get more comfortable with this technology um, interfacing care, right? And impacting care.
You are listening to my conversation about healthcare architecture with Rebecca McDonald and Kyle Basilius of Parkin Architects. We'll be right back. If you've listened to the show for any amount of time, you've heard me say this, that the most important word in the design industry is service. Product is important, price is important, selection is important, but stellar service is the premier idea that can make all the difference in the success of a project, any project. how design professionals like you demand great service and your favorite brands in one place with expert, knowledgeable, and non-commission sales professionals. It's really important. It means that their only incentive is your satisfaction. Pacific Sales, Kitchen and Home, a Best Buy company, has just that with over 60 years of experience in Southern California. Pacific Sales is your destination for exploration, advice, and inspiration. Now, you have the Pacific Sales Kitchen and Home team to help you and offer their Pro Rewards program, which is a trade program unlike any you have experienced before. Earn 3% in Best Buy gift cards, e-gift cards, or 2.5% in rewards checks for every qualified and delivered sale. In addition to special trade pricing, exclusive offers, access to exclusive special events, and so much more than I could possibly tell you about here. And the cherry on top is access to exclusive builder trade incentives from top brands and the stellar service, again, from a company that has been serving the industry for over 60 years. Terms and conditions apply to the Pro Rewards program and builder trade incentives. So visit a Pacific Sales expert at a showroom today for full details and to learn how you can unlock additional savings and benefits. Don't miss out on the opportunity to work with the best of the best. Visit Pacific Sales Kitchen and Home today and elevate your projects to new heights. The Design Hardware Showroom is a space where specifiers can go and find an incredible selection of high-end faucets, luxury tile, natural stone, wood floors, and bespoke hardware, and so much more. Select products are presented in a holistic manner, strategically arranged to stimulate creativity and transition your vision from the conceptual stage to a fully realized space. You will find everything you're looking for, even the products by brands you didn't know you didn't know. Surprise and delight. Am I right? All under one roof on 3rd Street in Los Angeles, just up the street from the Grove. Conveniently located, free parking available. Stop by to find inspiration, collect samples, get expert advice, and tackle everything on your specification list all in one place. Visit them online at designhardware.com, at Design Hardware and Flooring on the socials, or in the real world, 6053 West 3rd Street in Los Angeles. So the Emmys were on the other day. Did you happen to watch the Emmys?
I did.
I did not.
I'm a pop culture
Are you,
junkie.
are you a fan of The Pit?
Didn't start watching because I thought it'd be going down the Grey's Anatomy wormhole, which I got my fill back in the early 2000s.
Sure.
But I heard good things, so I'm thinking about trying it again maybe this weekend. Which I know it's won 5 awards, major awards. So,
Rebecca, did you watch The Pit?
I did not.
Okay.
I did not. No.
I bring it up because it got me thinking about our conversation. Because I'm a huge fan of The Pit. It's an amazing show, and look, to be honest with you, I can't tell you how realistic it is. I can tell you that in my youth, I spent a lot of time in the emergency room, but I wasn't really paying attention to the architecture or how it worked. But if you watch The Pit, many people have said, and I've heard Noah Wiley interviewed on this, he said, I spent a lot of time in ERs researching this, and this is exactly what it's like. The angst of watching this show in certain situations, mass casualty, as well as just day-to-day in an ER, there are so many pinch points because you can't predict anything about that environment. And the ER is very different from the remainder of a hospital. I think we can all agree on that, right? But there are a lot of things you can't plan on. The ER in particular is built for triage, not for an experience, right? It's just to make it stop and then figure out where you go from there.
Next. Yeah.
But at the same time, you also hear about there have to be ways to make the experience better so that you don't get a 6-hour wait to be seen, or that the experience of the doctors and nurses who work in there, that they don't just get destroyed every day coming to work, because you can actually make the experience better. I believe that that's what architects do. Yours is a different situation, but I'll give you an example. You have architects who design education facilities. the way that schools are and universities are being designed now because of school shooters, because of things that nobody ever thought would be possible. It's the architects who have to take that into account. So when you think about, because a show like The Pit, winning as many Emmys as it did, will now raise the interest level in that show again. More people will watch it. And that has this circular effect of coming back to why isn't our healthcare more effective, or why doesn't it work better, or why, right? So that always comes back to you. And it's
Hmm.
about the building, the design, the programming, how it works. And it's not so much about, are we going to have, outcroppings where you can do virtual and remote surgeries? Maybe it's something like a robo gurney first. And I'm just pulling this out of my head because I guarantee you, if I'm thinking about it, somebody else is thinking about it. If we've got robo taxis out on the street, someone is thinking about a way to have a robo gurney with a wristband on the patient that can take them everywhere they need to go. Has that come up in conversation? And do you think about concepts like that? Maybe not on the day to day, but how do you evolve the conversation?
Go ahead, Kyle. You want to take
I
it
love,
first?
Rebecca, that you throw everything. Go
Yeah.
ahead, Kyle. Take that one.
Well,
That
emergency
one's kind of
departments.
difficult. You
Well, we
need to
should
take
talk.
that one.
We should talk about the emergency department because that's where we started with Pitt. Emergency departments are their own little cities. That's why I think they're fun to plan. Um, and the way you do plan them, and the way you do design them, the way you do solve the problem is it is all about that throughput and where are the kind of points to demarc. So it is coming in. What's that initial experience like on a hospital we're designing on Vancouver Island? We've introduced a lot of mass timber. So our emergency entrance is kind of like a double height space with mass timber. So nice light filled space to come in. That's your first experience. And then we have an open kind of triage desk. From that triage desk, that's your first point of contact, right? So then they have to decide, do you go to the next sub waiting, which is kind of like this creating waiting spaces throughout to kind of stage people off? Um, do you need to go to the fast track? And there's an area where you just have chairs and you can immediately get things, your bumps and bruises fixed, or maybe you need medication and then they can send you home. So you don't go too far deep into the emergency department. The next step is the next level of acuity. So there's a low acuity zone, then there's a high acuity zone, and then there's trauma, right? From there, probably when you get all the way down there, you're probably going to go to a bed. And then that throughput is a bed available. So there is this kind of like little neighborhoods that we design in emergencies to help with that operational throughput. Because nowadays, with the mental health crisis, not enough facilities to go for mental health, everyone is coming to the emerge. If anything's wrong, we don't have a general practitioner, we're going to the emerge. So you're getting this inundation of population into the emerge. And they're always, clinical staff is challenged to get them out as fast as possible, diagnosed and out as fast as possible. Um, so that's where, right, AI could super help. I mean, if we're finding some facilities are slow to adapt remote technology, like it seems like it would be smart to be like, hey, I'm checking in, triaging on my phone, and I can go to the central atrium to wait. And we kind of build those spaces and we kind of leave infrastructure for that. But we find that as the design's progressing, the hospital system is slow to adapt to those systems, but they're being done at places. That technology interface, if the hospital can kind of get there, it can solve a lot of the space and waiting issues, right? They don't have to wait and emerge. They could be close by. They can get triaged from home, and then we can decide, do they even need to come to the emerge? Um, there's a lot of opportunity, definitely, especially with the emergency department.
Mhm. I'm just gonna probably jump off of the robotic gurney quest robo gurney question. So no, I mean I don't think I haven't talked about robots moving people yet, but we're planning for robots moving other things, right? And so to try and address or mitigate some of the resourcing challenges within our healthcare facilities, leveraging AGVs, which move, right, they move materials, carts, all your supply carts throughout the hospital. All I'm working on a project right now. We're planning for AGVs to move products, and then something called an AMR, which is a smaller robot that's about 2 feet square, moves medication throughout and lab products that have to go, samples that go to and from the lab, also by robot, right? So trying to perhaps the idea reduce the number of people steps that we're navigating in the hospital, and hopefully trying to mitigate some of those congestion points. Um,
And reduce staff injuries. That's a big cost to healthcare
exactly.
systems.
Thanks. Yeah.
Just the amount of square footage the porters and the logistical staff and nurses have to make. It's a big point of how we plan our departments. It's reducing nursing steps. It's how do we reduce injuries to staff when moving patients or moving materials. So when you get these larger facilities like Rebecca's working on, the biggest one in Canada, it's ginormous. You even have like soiled chutes. So, things aren't going to get carted around by a person, but they're automated down to the loading dock and out. So it's harder to do on a smaller project, but it's really about how do we reduce, you know, injury to keep staff healthy and happy, which also reduce costs and keeps their wellness up as well.
There's such a misunderstanding about these things, and I'm curious if you get any blowback from hospital staff when you're there doing research and asking what, nurses and orderlies and doctors and surgeons and what everyone needs, right? And the moment you say, I had a conversation with a designer a while back, and I was asking her about artificial intelligence as it related to the industry. And I got what I've heard a lot from a lot of people. I'm not wasting my time with that because you know what? I have a word of mouth. And believe me, I'm going somewhere with this. I have word of mouth, and I'm not going to lose my clients to artificial intelligence. That's true. They won't lose their clients to artificial intelligence. They will lose their clients to the designers who know how to use artificial intelligence to be more efficient, more effective, and do better work. I think that's a foregone conclusion. When it comes to things that change the nature of people's jobs, everyone gets really touchy when you do that. It's like, well, my job is moving the supply cart and keeping supplies updated in the OR or the ER or in every individual facility. Every room has to have its supplies, right? And that's my job. And that's job security. And you think that's great. And the union wants to support them. But I think what people don't realize is that is a tedious job. And you talk about injury, you know, if you could take those parts of the job away, those individuals could actually upscale and learn other skills that would make them more valuable, that would make them more money, and that would make their job more rewarding to them individually. When you go to hospitals, because I imagine you do a ton of research, do you hear those concerns? Because I imagine that has to affect the programming, and if it's affecting the programming, it's affecting the way you're designing.
So because of the nature of how we deliver this particular project that I'm working on, the programming, I wasn't directly involved with the programming. However, I can say that what they're finding, I think AI and these supportive technologies like our AGVs and our AMRs are supplementing resources within the healthcare system. And I think there is a very big um, hole in resourcing and staffing for healthcare facilities just generally, right? We are constantly trying to work with our clients to try and mitigate and identify ways that we can do more with less. And that sometimes that also applies to staffing because there just isn't enough people to go around. So I think that is how we try and frame it. It's about us. The technologies are supportive, right? And
Tools.
as Kyle said, yeah, it's a supportive tool to assist staff and to improve their workday and their work experience, reducing injury, etc. So that's really how
Less steps, more
it's been
times with the
framed.
patient. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
And to your point, Josh, like everyone is using it as a tool to do things better or do things more efficiently or find new ways of doing things. So that's across the board when even healthcare systems are saying, hey, if we can do this better and we can improve X, Y, and Z, there will be knock-on effects, like Rebecca said, but we're not really hearing the voice of like it's going to impact someone's job because I think we are starting at a deficit. Um, and then also the way to have staff retention is actually make their job easier, right? So there's a great dictation software to that uses AI to take meeting minutes while not meeting minutes, but takes dictation of the conversation with patients by bedside, and then they don't have to spend 8 hours of the end of their day doing dictation afterwards. So they're getting that one-on-one FaceTime with the patient. The computer is taking the notes. It is masking their identity so we can patient confidentiality. That's retention. You can come to work, you can spend your FaceTime with your patient your 8 hours, but then you don't have to go spend 8 more hours doing dictation. So we're seeing that as a plus, as I think it's being sold as a plus as instead of a negative, let's just say.
Yeah, yeah. I can see that, and I think it's an amazing opportunity. I ask about this because I'm fascinated by this idea, which is why I wanted to have this conversation in the first place. And I'm so grateful and appreciative that you made the time to do this. It's the little things that seem to have the biggest impact right now, because at the end of the day, and is it fair to say an enclosure is an enclosure? You know, if you're designing a campus with buildings, the buildings themselves, yes, a great deal goes into the design, but I don't know that that part of the design has changed so much. I'll give you an example. You know, again, some conversations from last week at CIX, lighting. What has happened in lighting, and that was the big star this year, and I was really surprised by some of the findings and some of the things that are happening with lighting. And if you think about it, it shouldn't be surprising. You know, 10 to 15 years ago, everything was incandescent, right?
Hmm.
And then we moved to that horrible CFL period where it gave off kind of like that, it emitted sort of a greenish time warp kind of vibe. And then CFLs got a little better, but they still weren't very good. Then you got into the first iteration of the LED, which, you know, was binary, it was on or it was off. Now, what you can do with LED lighting and what some of the integrators have been doing in a number of different typologies and environments is nothing short of extraordinary. And I would imagine that when it comes to accomplishing the goals and the needs that you have when it comes to designing healthcare facilities, modern healthcare facilities, lighting is such a big part of it that it feeds the overall vibe. Have your lighting plans changed as a result of new technologies in the space?
Actually, I've been kind of flagging on my current project. We have a whole I've worked for some places that had lighting designers, and I think it's something that we should do more of. It's usually held in the realm of our mechanical engineer. Um, but generally speaking, like lighting is extremely important in terms of circadian rhythm, the ability to dim it, especially on inpatient units or ICUs, that patients can sleep. If you disrupt their sleep, that impacts their recovery time. Um, I toured a hospital in Denver in July, and there was some really interesting lighting, just design wise, that was done. Like a strip light that went all the way around. It wasn't kind of like the 2x2, 2x4 old designs, and it lit up or dimmed the whole PACU, which is a post anesthesia care unit. And it was kind of like this modern light, but it had so much power in it to either fully light the space or kind of have this dim, kind of its nighttime phase. And I was really impressed with that kind of design. But there's more that could be done in that sphere, I think. I don't know, Rebecca, what's your take on lighting?
I just think the key, and building on what you said, I think the key is control, and what
Hmm.
the LED lighting packages have allowed us are really control by patients, control by staff. So um, within patient rooms and perhaps within pediatrics, if you LEDs allow you to color the room, right? Whatever color that the patient feels comfortable or wants that day. Also, dim or bright or whatever, depending on the time of day or what the patient wants. And I think that kind of control over your environment within a healthcare setting really kind of um, changes changes the experience, right? Gives you a little bit more control over your day in a setting where you feel perhaps a little bit out of control, right? It allows us a lot of flexibility within mental health environments to meet the needs of the individual patients. Also kind of within NICU, building on the circadian lighting Kyle referenced, right? If in neonatal intensive care units, you've really unless they're doing care by staff, you want the spaces to be relatively dark. So allowing that control at a room level, at a portion of a room level is really important, and I think it is kind of changing how the amount of kind of layering of lighting options within spaces. I think they've become much more complex in terms of like fixture count within a room. And that really is just to manage of the control over the space. So, staff can get what they want and the patient can get what they want, and same for the family. And so it's just allowing for a more controlled experience.
And you mentioned control, and again, back to budgets and budget constraints, because that's always part of it, right?
Yeah.
It's not like a residential project where a homeowner, you can bring in a Crestron or a Lutron system and show them how it will control everything in their environment. And they're like, well, okay, I'll add another $50,000 to the budget to make that happen. That's not necessarily what you're working with, I would imagine.
No.
So when it comes to new opportunities, that again, this ability to activate chromotherapy, to use control systems, to manage the lighting, the color tone of the lighting, the natural light that's coming in, that can use control systems like a Lutron or a Crestron system. Is that something that is budgeted into projects, or is that sort of a, I don't want to call it an aftermarket, but is that something that's kind of an afterthought once you get all the things that you have to have?
We're not seeing it get like VE'd out or value engineered out. It's very much a requirement that needs to be done just for operational sake. So like back to the inpatient room, we might have a light over the bed, but it actually has 5 or 6 functions, right? And so functions medically and clinically. Um, so the hospital understands that that's an important piece of the design that actually helps them with a throughput, right? Operational throughput, getting people better, faster, and out the door so they can have beds open for other sicker patients. So we're not finding that it's getting taken away as much. That's on the West Coast, but I don't know,
No,
Rebecca, you have
I
any?
would
Mhm.
agree here as well. So it is very much that kind of control is being anticipated and expected by the client, and it is remaining within the project. I will say um, from the user interface of those lights and how um, right the programming or the scene setting or those types of things is really critical in a healthcare facility. Staff don't have time to learn how to use the light fixtures, right?
Or to come in and change the light for them.
Like no one has time to learn that. And it really needs to be this and the focus on like intuitive usage and the user interface of that lighting has become kind of very important. And what when they do something, when they interact with those lights, they expect something to happen, and when it doesn't, it takes staff out time, and so I think that is the other end of it. So yes, we want all of this
Mhm.
flexibility, but it needs to be very intuitive and easy to use, and I think working through that on the switching level example is kind of is really really important.
And you were seeing, we're putting in night lights at the base in the floorboards. So when patients are getting out of bed without staff assistance, they're not falling or tripping. They can be guided by ambient night, low lighting to get to the restroom. If they're out in the corridor, ambient low lighting. That's really important for patient safety as well. So again, it all ties to kind of operations and staff safety and also patient safety, keeping people healthy enough or getting healthy so they can get back home and back to their lives.
Knowing that these are longer projects, and you talk about adding technological advances as they come online versus value engineering things due to budgetary constraints. And because when it comes to budgetary constraints, everything has gotten exponentially more expensive if you can get it. How do your teams approach the budget constraints now? And I'm asking this because in comparison to how you did it, maybe even pre-pandemic, just because we've had such a change in the way the business is done. How do you think about that, and how do you deliver on best experience while dealing with these huge cost increases in such a short amount of time?
Becca, you want to go first?
I'll start. And then so we call it the era of austerity. That's kind of my our new
That sounds
slogan.
ominous. It really does.
Well, that's the world we're living in.
So really it's about working with the client to identify the priority. What are your absolute priorities within the space? Um, and within the program and where are we going to prioritize the dollar spent. I think in spaces that are repeated frequently, right, i.e. a patient room, which in my case in the project we're working on is about like the rooms are repeated like 600 times. You need to really kind of optimize things, and say these are what's important and this is how we're going to really um, um, save where we can save, right? And what we think is important here. What is the most important from a staff and a patient and a family perspective? And we're going to kind of prioritize the dollars there. So lighting, i.e., lighting is become quite important, really, in that. And then in our case, it's all like single patient rooms, is a non-negotiable item at this point. So those are where the investments are being made. Where we where we might, the look to reduce capital investment would be maybe in kind of these back of house spaces, or working with clients and identifying hospitals, as Kyle pointed out, are the most expensive per square foot. Do we need, what can we, are there programs that we can deliver in a different way, perhaps not even in the hospital, right? To try and
Reduce cost.
pull those programs out of the program, out of the main acute center and deliver care in a different way. That the price per square foot for like an ambulatory care center is significantly less, right? So those are the kind of priorities they have to decide on. We help our support our clients in making to try manage the budget. Kyle, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, on this project I'm on, we've been constantly challenged to innovate because the budgetary, you know, up here, mm, healthcare infrastructure, the business plan starts 10 years before it actually opens. So it's much longer than, say, in the drive to market atmosphere in the United States. What that does is when we come on board after the business case is built and the program's built, we're working uphill against an unreasonable schedule and budget. Um, so that's when kind of challenge begins. To reframe, how are we going to do this better and smarter and faster, right? It's schedule, it's size, it's scope, it's, how are we putting things together? Like I'm designing a half cancer, half inpatient building with two different clients, and you know, it's been a directive of how they want to spread the cancer programs throughout the community, but they've paired them with acute care hospitals, which is a very expensive building. So we've challenged that of saying, this is more of an outpatient setting. You could save a ton of money and just build the bed tower. But there's pushback on that because of the powers that be in the ministry. However, yeah, it's like how can you build it faster and smarter and differently to actually save some money? Because nickel and diming lighting or finishes, you're never going to get there when your project's $2 billion. It's just impossible. It's really size and scope and speed to market.
Yeah, and because the costs are changing in some cases. I mean, I'm not getting
Hey,
political.
we're dealing with tariffs up here, so
That's what I was going to
one of the
say.
things is, well, we have a thing where we really have to look to only procure things either in Canada or outside of the United States to help save
Yeah,
costs, and that again goes to a provincial level because we procure things from a provincial level or ministry level. So that has changed a lot as well because a lot of the imaging equipment does not come from comes from the United States. So at sometimes you have to hit the cost, and it's gonna escalate, but it's just what we have to deal with because it's the moment of the time. And then COVID, of course, exacerbated everything as well with the supply chains.
yeah, yeah. And that's why, this is not an AI conversation. It's not, but I think it's
No.
hard to have any conversation without wondering or pondering how that technology might help cost effective savings in ways that we haven't even thought of without impacting negatively the experience of everyone who's using the space. It's an interesting question, and I don't think anyone's got the answers for it. That being said, to flip that around a little bit, what are you most excited about? Rebecca, I'll start with you this time so you can't throw it to Kyle. What are you both most expensive? What are you both most excited about right now that, I don't know, changes the work that you do, changes the way you work, any particular department that is being impacted in a way that makes you happy? Um, what is happening right now in your space that is making you optimistic about the projects you're designing for the way that they help people over the next 10 to 20 years?
So for me, I think I'm going to jump back to the community hubs for care. Really, for me, I think the shift back to a decentralized care model, to a focus on wellness within those decentralized care models, really brings us a really great opportunity to bring care to more people, right? Um, I think technology has a big part of that, but I think in 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 supporting access and perhaps earlier diagnoses and so keeping people out of the main acute care center. So I really think the community hub is for me the most exciting kind of program development and the spaces that we're going to design. Um, that's exciting for me. Kyle.
Yeah, I have a couple of things. One is outside of kind of building on what Rebecca says. There's these kind of new body scanners that they're doing in Sweden, and kind of spreading it around where you can pay $300 and get like a full body scan to kind of see like, is there any preventative care that can be addressed now? Um, I love this idea, especially from a public sector healthcare market. You know, in Canada, how do we solve problems better, as we critically think. You know, up here, it doesn't make sense to actually treat people when they're sick. It does down in the United States because the insurers, this is the way that the payment model is. You only make money off people when they're sick. Up here, we would save a lot of money treating people while they're healthy and keeping them out of the hospital, to what Rebecca was saying. And therefore, we would have more money for infrastructure instead of fighting the uphill battle. Um, but in terms of healthcare design, which I'm loving, is again, it's kind of this principle in my last two projects I've been trying to bring from my learnings in Scandinavia is all their public projects give something back to the public realm. So like they
Mhm.
have one of my favorite buildings in Copenhagen is a parking garage with a gym on top, and you can go up to the gym, and it has a racing clock if you want to run up the steps. Um, and so like the hospital in Vancouver Island, lots of mass timber bringing the natural elements in. How do we bring people to the hospital who aren't sick? What is that cafe moment in the community hall? We built this mass timber atrium where everybody kind of comes together. All circulation comes to one spot. We have a wellness loop with exercise equipment on it. In my current hospital, we're building it on the edge of a forest in a salmon creek, and a wellness loop that ties into the atrium, having mass timber there, having a space for cross collaboration of staff, having a place for families and visitors to collect, bringing the outdoors out and saying, this is a place that you could come and sit outside on the terrace and have a coffee. And maybe you don't need to go to the hospital, but like giving back to the community and making it a place for congregation. And I think that's where you can kind of break open the fortitude and the kind of lack of transparency of a hospital, but allowing it to be more transparent so that fear and that stigma is wiped away and you can see through and see people moving and working together. Um, and that everybody's there to help the community stay healthy.
Can I add just really fast? I think that building on what Kyle said, the another key component of some of our public spaces right now is the integration of art.
Mm.
And really, quite a few institutions that we work with or clients we work with are developing art programs, so that it gives people something to look at when they're at the hospital, but really reasons for people to come in to the hospital for quite literally a gallery, right? It's the art gallery in a more public space, which gives opportunity for cultural celebrations within the hospital that perhaps we haven't had previously. So I think, um,
And curation from the local community artists.
yeah,
On the Cowichan District Hospital on Vancouver Island, it's the largest Indigenous population in British Columbia. So it's about the hospital giving back and being a familiar face to destigmatize that coming for care is a safe place for them to come. So lots of locally commissioned art from the Cowichan tribes. We allow for smudging. It's the burning practice in every patient room, so they can actually shut down the mechanical system in every patient room in staff rooms, not only, and then be able to do ceremonies, smoking ceremonies in the hospital, so that if there's an end of life or even just someone's sick, they don't have to leave the room and go to a special space to do that. So that's now becoming the norm and standard, which is, making things appropriate to the community that they'll serve. So there's a lot of great things happening in the design, even with our budgetary issues.
yes.
Well, you know what? What's interesting too is if you go back from the very beginning of this conversation, the budget, as every good stoicist knows, you control the things that you can and you release the things you can't, right?
Mhm.
Budget feels to me like in your environment, it's not a residential project where a homeowner can just say, yeah, you know what? We'll add 50,000 for that because we love the idea. You have to deal with the budget you have to deal with. That's just, it is what it is. But there are so many ways through thought and execution to make the experience better, where it feels like if you could leave that white lab coat stress on the street before they come in and that anxiety level is lower, they're going to be better patients. The staff is going to have a better experience because they're not going to have to bring the person down, even in certain situations where you're dealing with mental issues and homelessness issues. And an emergency room is nobody ever wants to be in the emergency room. But if you can make that experience better, and I've said this for a long time, I feel that's what architects do. That's what designers do. So What I love about this conversation too, as we wrap it up, we are left with more questions than answers, which is kind of the way it should be. But it feels like there's a certain sense of optimism that, Rebecca, if you could realize those ideas of a hub and spoke model, it seems like it makes the industry stronger. Kyle, some of the things that we talked about, if we can implement those ideas, and make it more localized and a natural experience and takes the stress level out for people coming in, even at end of life, if it becomes an experience that doesn't come with as much pain and anxiety and anguish as would normally be there. That's the importance of these conversations. So, with that, I'm incredibly grateful and thankful that you both took the time to have it with me, and I'd love to do it again.
Thank you so
That's
much.
there's more to talk about. So
So much more.
Thank you, Rebecca. Thank you, Kyle. Amazing conversation, and one that this is not the end of. This is only the beginning. We will be having more of these conversations in the future. I appreciate your time and your insight and your skills. Amazing. Thank you to my partner sponsors, TimberTech, Pacific Sales, and Design Hardware, for being not just remarkable partners to the show, but being exceptional partners to the design community. It's amazing what you guys do. And without you, we could not be publishing our 650 plus episodes of this show over the last 13 years and being the longest running podcast of our kind. Nothing but gratitude and appreciation. So thank you. And thank you for listening. Without you, what's the point? Wouldn't want to do it. So thank you. Let's keep the conversation going, shall we? On Instagram at Convo by Design with an X, via email, convobydesign@outlook.com. Send me your emails with guest suggestions, show suggestions, places where you'd like to see the show broadcasting from in the future, because I love seeing you there. And my hope is that a couple of things, that you enjoy the show, that it helps keep you motivated, that you will look to the partner sponsors that we work with, Pacific Sales, TimberTech, and Design Hardware, because they support the design community, and it would be amazing if you'd give them an opportunity on your next project. Until next week, thanks for listening. Be well, and good Lord, rise above the chaos.